the intoxicating allure of summer. Sun-kissed beaches, cold refreshing cocktails, and of course, for many, the unforgettable experience of attending summer camp. As we venture further into our macabre journey through the realm of summer slashers, the opportune moment has arrived to delve into the twisted world of Sleepaway Camp, a film that manages to encapsulate the essence of both sun-soaked bliss and bone-chilling horror, even in its worst moments.
3 years after the genre-defining Friday the 13th came out, Robert Hiltzik took us through another camp mystery, one with a shocking twist ending, very shocking. I'm talking, of course, about Sleepaway Camp. Our story follows young Angela Baker, a shy and introverted teenage girl who loses her father and brother Peter at a young age in a traumatic boating accident. Angela's character is shaped by past trauma, and she carries emotional scars that affect her behavior and interactions with others. Angela is portrayed as an outsider and a social outcast throughout the film. She is quiet, withdrawn, and often the target of bullying and mistreatment from her peers. She now lives with her Aunt Martha and cousin Ricky. Aunt Martha is over-exaggerated and over-dramatic. Her performance seems extremely out of place when we are first introduced to the character. However, later on in the film, her behavior and eccentricities begin to make a lot more sense. What starts off as a possible aftermath of grief quickly escalates into something more unintentionally sinister and unnerving. Years after the accident that killed her father and brother, Angela, alongside her cousin Ricky, attends a summer camp on the same lake where the accident occurred. While at the camp, a series of murders occur, and we are left to question who the murderer might be. This film stands out amongst others in the genre largely due to the fact that all of the victims' deaths feel more justifiable compared to other contemporary slasher films. These blood-soaked tales typically have a very strong sense of punishment, serving as cautionary tales against the unholy trinity of alcohol, drugs, and premarital sex. But in Sleepaway Camp, instead of the usual bunch of naive, but ultimately sympathetic victims, we're instead treated to a parade of insufferable human beings. The film really goes out of its way to make you despise these characters to their very core. It's a bold move, really, to present victims who are so unapologetically loathsome. The film challenges us to reconsider our automatic sympathy for slasher fodder, forcing us to confront the dark corners of our own minds. Are we truly willing to shed a tear for those who've brought their grisly fate upon themselves? Or do we secretly revel in the comeuppance they receive? Sleepaway Camp serves up a feast of despicable characters, taking a wicked pleasure in making them suffer for their sins. And while it may deviate from the usual insidious conservative overtones often seen at the slasher genre, it does add a twisted layer of satisfaction to the blood-soaked proceedings. One particularly egregious example of how far the film goes to make its characters as vile and loathsome as possible comes early on in the film. We are shown a group of kitchen workers as they observe the children arriving at camp. The cook is among them, and makes a comment to the effect of,
"Look at all that young, fresh chicken,"
as the camera pans to the fleet-footed young girls zooming past. The chef, unable to control his salivary glands, can't help but lick his lips. This statement is made all the more disturbing by the fact that, unlike many slasher films, the campers are not portrayed by 20-somethings pretending to be teens, but by actual teenagers. The assistant cook chimes in with,
"They're too young to even understand what's on your mind."
He doesn't display disgust at the cook's unashamed sexual objectification of children, or even state that it's wrong or inappropriate, just that they're too young to comprehend. He even laughs, seemingly amused by the statement. The cook then doubles down on his declaration of pedophilic attraction with all the subtlety of a sledgehammer, stating,
"There ain't no such thing as being too young."
It's a grim reality highlighting the deeper issues at play, where society seems disturbingly comfortable with such objectification. The cook's twisted desires are met with a scalding punishment, courtesy of some boiling water, but he does survive, defying the conventional horror trope of getting his just desserts. Meanwhile, his complacent companions who turned a blind eye face no consequences for their inaction, and in fact end up all getting raises. Sleepaway Camp also delivers stereotypical projections of women. When first arriving at camp, Ricky is told, "Wait until you see Judy," his friend indicating the size of her breasts. Judy herself is malicious, spiteful, jealous, and promiscuous. Her advancement into puberty and her poor behavior is implied to go hand in hand. And let's not forget about her partner in crime, Meg, who takes sexually adventurous behavior to a whole new level by trying to seduce the camp owner. Talk about setting high standards. Together, this dynamic duo terrorizes poor Angela, making her life a living nightmare. They're the poster children for the film's prime examples of femininity. In typical slasher fashion, people at the camp start being murdered in over-the-top and borderline comical ways. The kills in Sleepaway Camp stand out due to their unconventional methods. The film incorporates unique and memorable murder techniques. For example, one character is scalded with boiling water, while another is killed by a swarm of bees, and these unconventional methods add to the overall memorability of the kills. These deaths are often shocking and unexpected, leaving a lasting impression on viewers. But many of these deaths are not explicitly shown in the film. For instance, the death scene involving a curling iron is often cited as one of the most memorable and disturbing moments in the film, and it's a kill that we only see in shadow. At other times, we are shown the aftermath of the kill, but not the kill itself. The scene where a counselor finds the body of one of the campers with a snake slithering out of his mouth is also particularly memorable. Many people think that Sleepaway Camp is a ripoff of Friday the 13th, but the truth is that Robert Hiltzik, the mastermind behind this movie, hatched the idea back in film school when he was just 23, 2 years before the film was actually made. Horror movies were the hot ticket at the time, and they still are today. They were cheap to make and easy to sell, so Hiltzik saw an opportunity. He drew inspiration from his own childhood memories of going to camp, thinking it would be the perfect setting for a horror flick. With all the cabins, woods, lake, and rec center, he had plenty of variety without having to scout multiple locations. Genius move, really. The camp they ended up using was Camp Algonquin in Argyle, New York. Hiltzik knew the owners and pitched them the idea of filming during the off-season when the camp was closed. They were thrilled to make some extra cash and happily agreed. With the location secured, Hiltzik had the beginning and end of the movie figured out, and he just had to fill in the middle. With a budget of roughly $50,000, Hiltzik gathered his cast and crew. Jonathan Turston, a cool 17-year-old, snagged the role of Ricky, while 13-year-old Felissa Rose landed the part of Angela. The role of Judy had two contenders, and even though Hiltzik envisioned a blonde to contrast against Angela's dark brown hair, Karen Field's audition rocked his world, and she clinched it over the other girl, Jane Krakowski. Filming kicked off in September 1982 and lasted for 6 weeks. They were savvy enough to shoot most of the wooded scenes early on, fearing that the longer they waited, the more obvious it would be that fall, not summer, was creeping in. They even had to resort to spray painting leaves and grass green to cover up the autumnal hues. Resourcefulness at its finest. Given the low budget, they had to pinch pennies wherever they could. Many of the extras running off the buses were actually relatives of Felissa Rose. The cast brought their own clothes for the wardrobe, and the locals in town were thrilled to have a movie filmed there, lending a hand with borrowed ambulances, police cars, and uniforms. They even roped in the actual local paramedics for a scene to play the paramedics in the film. Several of the cast have stated that filming Sleepaway Camp really was like going to summer camp. They all ate in a large group in the cafeteria. There was very little adult supervision, and there were even some summer romances. It was quite the experience. When it came to scoring the film, most slashers had generic soundtracks, but not Sleepaway Camp. Hiltzik went all out with a full orchestral score. It's an interesting approach, and sets it apart from the pack. And let's not forget the practical effects by Ed French. They still hold up today. From blister-filled burns to snakes crawling out of mouths, they brought the gore to life. Angela's hands weren't the ones doing the dirty work in the killing scenes. Felissa Rose's mom had it in her contract that she wouldn't actually participate in any of the scenes of killing in the film, and so it was actually the hands of Jonathan Thurston, who played Ricky. The film wrapped up in October, and Hiltzik, expecting an X rating, was overjoyed when they landed an R instead. Phew. Felissa Rose even brought her 8th grade classmates to see the film on opening weekend. Talk about a memorable field trip. Robert Hiltzik wrote a script entitled Sleepaway Camp 2, but after a few meetings with executives, he decided not to pursue the project. He did, however, sign over the rights to producer Jerry Silva for Sleepaway Camp 2 and 3. At the time, horror comedy was becoming more popular with characters like Freddy Krueger churning out witty one-liners between kills, but Hiltzik's script was more of a straightforward slasher without all the witty banter, and so Silva handed over the script to Fritz Gordon, who then penned the actual scripts used for both Sleepaway Camp sequels, turning them into dark comedies, a change which Hiltzik was not pleased with. He disowned the films and left the industry altogether, deciding to dedicate his time instead on his wife and children. A move with is completely understandable. However, in 2008, Hiltzik decided to come out of retirement to produce and direct Return to Sleepaway Camp, which he saw as the true sequel to the original. The man couldn't resist the siren call of Sleepaway Camp, it seems. It's difficult to talk about Sleepaway Camp without discussing the ending, which is a contender for the most memorable ending of any slasher film. It's interesting to note that there are more people who are familiar with the ending of the film than the rest of the story, as even people who have never seen the film have heard about the ending. The killer is not only revealed to be Angela, but it is revealed that Angela is actually Peter, as the real Angela died in the boating accident, but her aunt, who always wanted a girl, forced Peter to take on the persona of Angela, conforming to a gender identity not chosen by them, but rather one that was forced upon them. The film speaks to the mental and emotional toll being forced into a gender can take. Here, Angela allows the repression of self to stay quiet and reserved as to not reveal herself. As the murders progress and increase in violence, so too does the escalation of her mental and emotional turmoil. She is reaching a point where she can no longer take or want to take, being forced into the gender she had no choice of. She breaks free in a terrifying reveal, almost demonic in nature, as her screams unnerve any viewer. A scream that has been building since she was a child. Angela is forced to live a lie, to live as someone else. She knows she is a boy, and while the biological aspect plays in here, it does not change the fact that she was forced to live a life in a form that she did not choose and she did not identify with. In the 1970s and 1980s, conversion therapy and a war on marriage, coupled with the growing AIDS epidemic, too many had to hide themselves, their true selves. The relationship between queerness and horror often manifests itself in extremely different ways. Horror can serve as the perfect canvas to encapsulate the existential dread of being forced to live on the fringes of society, but it can likewise be used as a sneaky outlet to perpetuate misguided bigotry. It is also interesting to note the portrayal of Angela's father's sexuality in this film. There has been a lot of debate among fans over whether this depiction leans more toward positive or negative representation. Personally, I believe that it leans more toward the negative end of the spectrum. The placement of the scene in question plays a crucial role in shaping our perception. We are initially introduced to a man who shares a relationship with Angela's father at the film's outset. However, it is not until later, and even then, never explicitly defined, that we confirm the nature of this relationship. This ambiguity raises pertinent questions regarding Angela's well-being, and whether she might have been better placed under his care after the tragic incident that unfolds early on in the film. If this man is simply their father's boyfriend, it would align logically with the circumstances. However, if they were engaged in a long-term committed relationship, the situation becomes significantly more intricate and emotionally distressing for both Angela and him. In such a scenario, Angela would have not only lost her sibling and father in the tragedy, but might also face separation from her other father, the sole surviving member of her immediate family. Astonishingly, the film fails to explore any of these compelling dynamics. To compound matters, the scene depicting the two men together in bed is contrasted with another scene in which Angela engages in a makeout session with a boy on the beach. This encounter takes an uncomfortable turn as the boy attempts to push boundaries beyond Angela's comfort zone. It is at this time that the film chooses to show us a flashback of Peter and Angela witnessing the two men in bed together in a loving embrace. This stark contrast leads me to believe that the scene is intended to be viewed as more discomforting than heartwarming, further exacerbating the negative undertones surrounding the portrayal of Angela's father's sexuality. In the intricate tapestry of this film, the nuances of family dynamics and the impact of tragedy intertwine with the exploration of sexuality. However, the missed opportunities to delve into the complexities and emotional repercussions leave us yearning for a more nuanced and empathetic examination of the subject matter at hand. Sleepaway Camp is an interesting case study on trans representation in media. Angela, though not technically a trans woman, manages to embody some seriously harmful stereotypes about trans women, reinforcing the idea that anything non-cisnormative should be feared. And let's not forget the grand reveal at the end, where the film hastily slams on the credits as if to say, "Oh, by the way, being trans makes you violent," playing directly into this psychotic trans trope that seems to permeate throughout the horror landscape. This trope carries with it the assumption that trans folks, especially trans women, are naturally inclined to be violent and dangerous. And if you don't already go into the film with the preconceived notion that trans people or those who challenge gender norms are scary or violent in some way, then the ending of Sleepaway Camp might leave you feeling disoriented and scratching your head. Sure, the music and imagery are still chillingly effective, but its impact will undoubtedly differ for those who are more familiar and accepting of gender nonconformity than those who see transgender people as some kind of boogie persons. The psychotic trans trope is an extension of the notorious gay villain trope, which can trace its lineage back to historically homophobic institutions and principles like the belief that being gay was a curable psychological disorder. It is not a psychological disorder and cannot be cured. In this case, the transgender killer is inexorably connected to homosexuality in common public perception, even though, mind you, there are transgender folks of every sexual orientation. It hints at the subtle fabric of transphobia woven into the very tapestry of our society. It's a systemic issue that requires systemic solutions. When these toxic stereotypes are incessantly reinforced on screen, they seep into the collective consciousness and shape public perception. Media has an immense power to influence attitudes and beliefs. When trans characters are consistently depicted as violent, unstable, or villainous, it reinforces negative biases and fosters fear and distrust in the minds of viewers. It creates a distorted lens through which people may view real-life trans individuals, and can contribute to the stigmatization and marginalization of trans communities. When trans characters are repeatedly cast as villains, it reinforces the idea that they are other, abnormal, or even monstrous, which fuels discrimination and prejudice, and can lead to a lack of understanding and even empathy towards trans individuals in real life. The consequences of these portrayals extend beyond mere entertainment. They can manifest in real-world discrimination, harassment, and violence against trans people. Media shapes societal narratives and influences public opinion, which in turn affects legislation, social norms, and the treatment of trans individuals in various spheres of life. One obvious example of this is the push to force trans people into using the wrong bathroom, which relies on the assumption that trans women pose a threat to cis women in public restrooms, a notion that is unfounded and rooted in misinformation. In reality, allowing trans women to access facilities that align with their gender identity does not increase the risk of harm to cisgender women. Trans women are not inherently predatory or threatening, and numerous studies and real-world examples have shown that there is no correlation between transgender-inclusive policies and an increase in safety concerns. In fact, it is transgender individuals who face a higher risk of discrimination, harassment, and violence when forced to use facilities that do not correspond with their gender identity. It not only undermines their sense of safety and privacy, but also exposes them to hostile environments where they may encounter transphobic individuals who may react with aggression and even violence. Such situations can inflict severe emotional and psychological harm on trans individuals, and can hinder their ability to participate fully in public life. Creating inclusive spaces where trans people can access facilities corresponding to their gender identity is vital for fostering equality, dignity, and safeguarding their well-being. It might seem tempting for some to seek a logical explanation behind these tired cliches. Several critics have noted that depictions of cross-dressing or transgender serial killers owe their foundations to notorious, real-life killer Ed Gein. Gein would serve as inspiration for a variety of fictional murderers, including Norman Bates from Psycho, Buffalo Bill from Silence of the Lambs, and Leatherface from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Robert Bloch's novel Psycho was the first to fictionalize Gein, which was adapted for the screen 1 year later by Alfred Hitchcock. Conveniently for Hollywood, Gein provides a convenient scapegoat for the association between cross-dressing and psychosis. Gein has supplied a vindication for the origins of Norman Bates, as well as all subsequent portrayals of cross-dressing and transgender killers. At this juncture, I would like to point out that cross-dressing and transgenderism may share some similarities, but they represent distinct concepts. Cross-dressing refers to the act of wearing clothing typically associated with a different gender, usually for personal expression, entertainment, or cultural reasons, without necessarily experiencing a deep-seated identification with that gender. It is often considered a form of gender expression, and can be temporary or occasional. On the other hand, transgenderism pertains to a person's deeply felt and persistent identification with a gender different from the sex assigned to them at birth. Transgender individuals often experience gender dysphoria, a disconnect between their gender identity and assigned sex, and may pursue various steps, including social transition, hormone therapy, or gender-affirming surgeries, to align their physical appearance with their true gender. Transgenderism encompasses a broader and more profound aspect of one's identity, reflecting an internal and enduring experience of gender. But often in media representations, the two are conflated due to oversimplification and generalization, as media tends to gravitate towards easy narratives and stereotypes. Additionally, societal understanding of gender and identity is still evolving, and misinformation or lack of education about transgenderism can perpetuate misunderstandings. Media portrayals may inaccurately conflate transgender individuals with cross-dressers, disregarding the nuanced differences in their experiences, identities, and motivations. It's easy to point a finger at Ed Gein and say, he's the source of this deranged transsexual stereotype. But the truth is that there is no conclusive evidence to suggest that Gein was ever anything other than a heterosexual, psychotic, schizophrenic man, fixated with his mother, driven to kill and steal female body parts not because he wanted to be a woman, but because he wanted to find a substitute for his mother. And let's be real here. There's simply no reasonable excuse for embracing such a ridiculously transphobic mindset. It's the same as depicting gay men as pedophiles or black men as rapists. And what makes it even more insidious is the fact that, in reality, trans women, especially trans women of color, are far more likely to be victims of violence than perpetrators. It's no coincidence that the majority of these psychotic transsexual characters are played by cisgender men. In fact, Sleepaway Camp is one of the only examples where this is not the case. Films like Psycho and Silence of the Lambs do state within the film that these characters are not trans. And to be clear, Angela is also not trans. But to somebody who is unwilling to believe trans people are the gender that they identify with, the distinction between an actual trans person who makes the conscious decision to transition and a boy who is forced to transition by his crazy aunt doesn't matter, and in fact none of these nuances matter to someone with that mindset. The function of these depictions is to make any form of gender variance seem scary and off-putting. Suddenly, anyone who doesn't conform to cisnormative standards becomes a monster, stripped of their humanity. While our spotlight has been on trans women for this particular film, let's not forget that these stereotypes also cast their dark shadow on trans men, gay men, lesbians, non-binary people, and basically anybody who's even slightly gender non-conforming. This trope serves a devious purpose: to uphold rigid gender roles by painting any deviation from them as utterly terrifying. And Sleepaway Camp is a textbook example of this trope in action. The film uses its twist ending and Angela's gender nonconformity as a convenient explanation for her violent actions. It's like they're saying, see what happens when you dare to step outside the lines of gender expectations? Enjoying films that utilize transphobic stereotypes doesn't make you a terrible person. However, it's essential to recognize that some films, including Sleepaway Camp, employ transphobic stereotypes that can't be brushed off. It's okay to like problematic media, but when the problematic aspects of a film are pointed out, ignoring or downplaying those aspects because you like the film and getting defensive when people point them out is not okay. It's not about what you like, but how you handle it. We need to be able to acknowledge the problematic aspects, engage in critical discussions, and be open to understanding diverse perspectives. These films can't take all the blame for transphobia. While they may reinforce transphobic ideas, these films are merely a mirror of the society in which they were created, reflecting the way many actually view trans people. Don't get me wrong, these movies can still be entertaining, but we should always question the hidden messages they might unknowingly reinforce, no matter how harmless they may appear. I like the film Sleepaway Camp. I understand why it's a cult classic, but that doesn't change the fact that there are things about the film I can't defend. I definitely can't defend that mustache, but seriously, it's important to view even the media that we like critically, not try to ignore problematic aspects because we enjoy the film.
I know I kind of went off on a tangent on this one, but it's an issue I feel strongly about, and I think we should all feel strongly about seeing people having their rights stripped away. I'm a cishet man, and I'm not an authority on any of this. It's important for people to be able to tell their own stories, but I also believe that we have to be willing to stand with trans people. They deserve to live their lives and to do so authentically. And there are people right now attempting to pass laws to eradicate them. If you don't believe that trans people should have the same rights and protections that cis people do, then fuck you. You're a piece of shit. I'm sure none of the people that that's targeted towards are even still watching this video, but fuck them anyway. To everyone else, thank you. If you like this video, can you please hit the like button? You can also subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to be updated whenever I upload a new video. And until next time, keep on creeping.